Greetings and welcome to another episode of the Unnamed Bracketology podcast. My name is Kerry Miller, joined as always by my good friend Graham Dorn. It is Monday. That means it's ACC day, and I dug out a 2017 ACC tournament hat. Didn't even go to the 2017 ACC tournament. I think they just brought them to Media Day because they had a surplus. But Graham, we disagree pretty considerably on the seeding of one team in particular, but we agree that this is a 10 bid league right now, most of any conference, at least for me. Did you, in your wildest dreams, see this coming for the ACC this year?
No, I thought, well, first off, I still don't think it's going to happen. I think the
That's
ACC
fair.
will end up with 8 or 9 bids at the end of the day, not 10. But the fact that we're even talking about 10 is completely unexpected. So, real step up for the ACC after not just last year, but really a number of years at this point. Really happy to see the ACC having the success that it's really traditionally had in the postseason, this time translating to the regular season as well.
Yeah, I feel like there are only five and a half maybe teams that I feel pretty solidly are going to be tournament teams. We'll see how the rest shakes out. I agree. It'll probably be eight or nine when all is said and done. Let's throw up the spreadsheet here. Before we dive in, we did get one Q&A question on the old blue sky from a Pawn Sturm. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but yes, is UNC's record hiding flaws that will be exposed during league play? And if so, is it because of roster construction, talent, or coaching? I don't really know how I want to answer that question, but I do think it's interesting that North Carolina's 14-2, but the predictive metrics don't love them at all. They had a close call the other day against who they play on Saturday? Wake
Wake Forest.
Forest. Um, they lost pretty badly to SMU. Had that close call against Ohio State, which is probably not a tournament team right now, or right on the bubble at the very least. Even that win at Kentucky by three, like at this point, that's what you should do against Kentucky if you're a top five seed. So, what are your thoughts on North Carolina, who I wasn't particularly thinking about touching on today, but we got a question on them?
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think North Carolina is likely to fall back a little bit. They're my 16th overall seed right now, so last four seed. I do think they're probably more likely to end up in that 5 to 6 range on Selection Sunday. I don't buy, if you look at the predictive metrics, they're saying 32. I don't think they're going to fall
Yeah.
that back. Like that's an 8 or a 9 seed if you're talking about a 32 range. I don't think they'll fall that far. But I do think it's going to be a tricky road trip for North Carolina to go to Stanford, to Cal. I don't think either of those teams are great teams by any means, but do I think North Carolina is going to win both of them? Probably not. And it could end up being a disastrous scenario if they go out there and drop both, because that would really affect their seed. I think North Carolina probably goes 1-1 in that trip.
All right, well, let's start there with Cal in particular, who now we have as basically dead, but obviously they have that massive opportunity at home against both Duke and North Carolina. If they show up for either of those games better than they did against Louisville, um, do you think one win, either one, obviously the Duke win would be better, but would either one put them right back in the mix for kind of that last four, first four range, or do they need both to have any pulse whatsoever?
I think I do think the Duke one's better. Like that's the best way I can put it. Like I think the Duke win, I would much rather get that one than the North Carolina game. If that's what it comes down to, nobody's going to fault you for losing to North Carolina, but a win over North Carolina at home is a very good win. Is it an eye popping win? No. Beating Duke's an eye popping win. So I would say if they beat Duke, I think they're right in that picture if they win one of the two. If they beat North Carolina, I think they're still a little bit on the outside, but in the picture. And if they win both of them, I think at that point, Cal is clearly in the field. And then, of course, 0-2, perhaps the most likely of all the scenarios. I think Cal is pretty much drawing dead as an at-large
Yep,
candidate. I don't think they can afford both losses.
I agree. They don't play Duke, North Carolina, Virginia, or Louisville again. I think they get Clemson at home. So I believe their best opportunity after this week is at Miami. And as you can see here, they don't have quality wins thus far, already have a questionable loss at Kansas State. So, yeah, I almost feel like they need to have both to really have any chance. But if they beat Duke, that would at least temporarily vault them back into the mix. Speaking of losing to Duke, SMU, I thought it was interesting. They lost both those games at Clemson, at Duke, and didn't really move at all. We talked yesterday on our weekend wrap up about Baylor losing at home to both Iowa State and Houston, and that was kind of like our last straw with them. Why did SMU? I mean, I obviously I also kept them pretty much static, but why didn't they move at all when other teams do if they lose two games, even if it's two quad 1A games?
Yeah, I was thinking about that myself. I was surprised. It didn't even dawn on me until Kerry, you had mentioned earlier today to me, like, hey, they didn't really move. And I was like, oh, that is odd that I didn't think about it, but they didn't. And sometimes I think it just comes down to what's happening around you, right? Like Tennessee got pounded by Florida. You look at similar teams in that range. Louisville lost again. Arkansas got destroyed by Auburn. Sometimes just not getting blown out is enough to stay in front of some other teams. So I think it's, really less about what SMU did and maybe some of the negative impacts of the teams around them.
Other results from the past week, both Syracuse and NC State picked up two road wins. I think all four of those wins were by double digits, but it was against like Boston College, Pitt, Florida State. Nothing eye-opening, but it puts Syracuse on the map and it brings us to NC State, where we have our biggest divide here. It's not huge. It's still a 9 seed versus an 11 seed, whatever. But what's your case for NC State at 35? Because for me, they don't have uh they don't even have a quad 2A win, let alone a quad 1 win, and they haven't even faced a marquee opponent. They lost, I think at Auburn was probably their most acceptable loss of the season. Now, all five of their losses were quad 1, but they've done nothing good. I can only barely get them in. How'd you end up with them as a 9?
Yeah, I think this is one of those where this is why we do this. And what I mean by that is you can't just computer with some of these teams, right? Like there's that real qualitative analysis that the committee's going to have to get into. They could say, hey, Kerry, you got 45 on the resume metrics. Kerry, you got 45 overall. Couldn't match up any better. And I agree. If they're just looking at, how did this team perform as far as wins and losses so far, that seems like an absolutely appropriate way to put them. And I think there's a very good chance the committee would do that. The reason I have them at 35 overall right now is I'm looking at that qualitative metric of 25.3 and just the way NC State has looked when they've won. Look at what they did to Florida State. I mean, they didn't just beat Florida State, they absolutely annihilated Florida State in a road victory. I think that sort of impression lasts with the committee. So, do I think they have good wins? No, I don't think they have good wins. But if you look at their performance against quads 1 and 2, they are 500 against the first two quadrants, don't have any losses outside of that. So, when the committee's going over resumes, I could see them saying, like, hey, we got some other teams that have a losing record against quad 1 and 2. NC State's 500, and look, they're 25 in qualitative metrics. These other teams are 45, 55. Like, do we really think that team is better than NC State? And I think once you start to get into these middle seeds, that's where it can get really interesting for the committee. Like last year, I had Baylor as a 9 seed, which was actually a little bit higher than most people had them. And they did end up getting a 9 seed. And part of that analysis for me was, yeah, their quad splits really aren't that bad, and their qualitative metrics are pretty good. I think the committee might, when they're just trying to search for who do we put here, they got to choose somebody. So sometimes you just default to who you think is genuinely the best team.
Yeah. What else? Here in this same vicinity, Miami, Virginia Tech, Stanford, it's just a big cluster. Which of those three do you have the most faith in moving forward? Or not even the most. Why don't we rank them 1 through 3? Because for me, Stanford's at the bottom.
As far as going forward, or where do I have them right now?
Yeah, yeah. Well, long term, who do you have the most faith in?
I think Miami's going to make the NCAA tournament. I feel pretty confident they're going to make the NCAA tournament. I think Virginia Tech is barely above Stanford from my long-term projections, and then I think Stanford's there at the bottom. Something that I think could hurt Virginia Tech is if it comes down to them and Stanford at the end. Stanford got the win at Virginia Tech. That could potentially be crucial if it gets there, but I think it's more likely that Virginia Tech and Stanford both miss the tournament, and NC State and Miami end up getting in.
That feels about right. Certainly from the predictive metrics here, right? Miami 37, Virginia Tech and Stanford both not good. That suggests they will eventually fall off. Probably this week, even. Virginia Tech at SMU. Stanford's got that home slate against North Carolina and Duke. That's probably three losses. We'll see about that Notre Dame game.
Yeah,
Anything
like,
else? Go
just
ahead.
on that note, I think Stanford had a good opportunity on the road to potentially get a meaningful sweep that would have put them, like, if they had won both Virginia Tech and UVA,
Oh, yeah.
I think they would have ultimately ended up making the tournament. Conversely, I feel like Virginia Tech needed both Cal and Stanford. I think losing one of those is going to come back to bite them at the end. And I genuinely think my personal prediction is that they would have made the field on Selection Sunday had they beaten Stanford. I think they're going to come back and look at that game and be like, that collapse in the final minute is why we ended up missing the tournament.
Crazy thing about Stanford is you would think a team with losses at home to UNLV, Seattle, and Notre Dame, right? It would be the resume metrics keeping them out, but it's the predictive metrics that look hideous. If you just go based on resume, they're pretty solidly there at 40, but I don't know if I have faith in them. I love Abuka Corey. I hope that he gets more publicity for Stanford hanging around because he's fun to watch, but I don't know that I believe in their staying power. What else did I have on our list here? Miami won at Wake Forest. We didn't really much talk about them. They're 14 and 2. Kind of talked about them a little bit last week as just this team that hasn't done much. They won at Wake Forest, and that immediately became their best win of the season. And as you can see down here, we don't have Wake Forest in. So, what do you think will become of Miami? Is this just a massive week for them? I mean, at Notre Dame, I mean, that's one they could lose, but it's not going to help them if they win. But that game at Clemson, is that probably the ACC game of the week?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think you could make an argument that that's the ACC game of the week. I will say, I think it's an important game at Notre Dame for Miami. I assume they're probably going to lose to Clemson. Who knows? But I assume they're probably going to lose that one. That at Notre Dame game, that becomes the sort of game that separates the bubble team who makes the tournament from a bubble team who misses the tournament.
Hmm.
It's a quality win if you get that. It's not a great win, but it's a quality win, and I think that's the sort of win that ultimately Miami, I predict, will get that victory, and that's what will ultimately help them make the field.
It's one of those fun wins, right? Notre Dame is 74th in the net, so you want them to win by one, so it doesn't knock their net down too far, so it stays a quad one result. Last thing, if you had to pick one of these four teams that are on the board but not, in our field, one of those four I tell you is going to get in. Who would it be?
Syracuse. I would have told you Wake Forest previously, but
Yeah.
Syracuse has actually played pretty well on the road recently, and that win over Tennessee looks pretty darn good. So I think I'm going to go with the Qs.
Yeah. So they've one great win over Tennessee and just that one bad loss to Hofstra. I mean, if your second worst loss is to Clemson, who we now have at, both of us have them as a 5 seed. Yeah, that's pretty good. So they definitely have the ability to swing in a big way, I think more so than these other three teams. But that will wrap us up for now on the ACC chat. Nothing happening tonight outside of like McNeese against Nichols, who only the craziest bracketologists care about. I don't know if the basketball programs thought the college football championship was today or what happened there, that there's nothing happening today. But until next time, enjoy the hoops. Take care.